Good evening. This work session of the Osseo School Board is being conducted in the boardroom of the Educational Service Center at 11200 93rd Avenue North in Maple Grove. The work session is being audio recorded. The recording will be made available on the district website within 2 business days after the work session has ended. The intent of the school board work session is to allow for school board discussion of topics. Work sessions do not include an opportunity for the audience members to address the board. And because this is only audio recorded, I'm just going to ask the audience to please don't talk during, as much as you can, don't talk during the meeting so that we can make sure we've got good audio recording for everybody to be able to listen to later. To acknowledge attendance this evening, I'll ask that all present at the table state their name, starting with Ms. Jackie.
Jackie Mosqueda Jones, school board member.
Sarah Mitchell, school board member.
Brian Bass, assistant superintendent.
Avery Moore, general counsel.
Dwayne Mordali, director of educational achievement.
Robin Vincent.
Equity.
Robin Gonzalez, director of learning and achievement.
Adriana Dodge, student from Park Center.
Whoop, whoop.
Thomas Brooks, school board member.
Tamara Grady, she, her, school board member.
Kim Heil, superintendent.
And I, Tanya Simons, school board member and present. The purpose of the school board work session is to build trust and teamwork, to exchange information, and when applicable, to provide direction in order to facilitate efficient and effective decision-making at regular board meetings. I'll now ask Dr. Howell for her check-in for this work session. Dr. Howell.
Right. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, school board members and cabinet members and our presenters. This is my first board work session, so I'm excited. Tonight, our work is going to be about discussing and sharing. Tonight all revolves around our district strategic plan, our operational plan, and how the input was taken from all of our stakeholders. From our operational plan, we've created a smaller strategic priorities for 23-24, and we'll go into more detail on that later on, board members. At this time, I would like to point out strategy priority A, though, which is create a safe, welcoming, and inclusive learning environment that fosters global curiosity, belonging, innovation, and engagement. So within this priority, we are in the implementation stage of respect, value, and humanize each and every scholar's race, culture, and identity. I also want to just state the goal aligns with our district core values of belonging and inclusion. So board members, as we enter into our first report on the LGBTQIA plus resolution, I would like for us to keep the following at the forefront of our minds: that there are legal requirements that need to be followed in order for us to be able to have this resolution. There are items in the resolution that need to be worked on. For some of our community, you may feel that there has been a lack of transparency due to some of our communication, and I do want to state that the district will work to correct this in the future. We are further studying and deepening our awareness and understanding of the action items in the resolution. Our goal is to make Osseo area schools one community for all, where all are heard and valued. And we will work hard to ensure that this is done. So board members, as we enter this conversation, as you understand, we hold space, and I'm just going to share what holding space means for us, and we will hold space for our presenters today. The concept of holding space, it means that we're willing to walk alongside another person in whatever journey they're on without judging them, making them feel inadequate, trying to fix them, or trying to impact the outcome. When we hold space for another person, we're open our hearts, offer unconditional support, let go of judgment and control. So it's with pleasure that I introduce our first presenters this morning on the resolution, this evening on the resolution. Dr. Brian Bass, Assistant Superintendent of Equity and Achievement. Ms. Amy Moore, General Counsel. Dwayne Mordali, Director of Educational Equity. Robin Gonzalez, Director of Learning and Achievement. And the best person here, Adriana Dodge, Park Center Senior High Scholar. Thank you for the presenting.
All right, thank you for setting the table. Dr. Heil, members of the board, we are excited to be here this evening and share our learning and our progress in implementing the action items of the LGBTQIA plus history and culture resolution. Dr. Heil has just introduced the presenters, so I won't reintroduce them again. Our presentation, as Dr. Heil mentioned earlier with our strategic priorities, one of the documents that will be reviewed this evening, We do have a strategic direction A, and Dr. Howe also read the
Sorry, I stole it, Joe.
the high priority. So yeah, that was part of what I was going to share. So we're going to have Robin move us to the slide for outcomes, and then we'll get it started.
You're just a little stuck here for some reason. Is it? It's when outcomes and needs to restart. 30%. So maybe a minute.
Robin, you think we should just plug in your laptop? Should we just...
I believe there's some seats over here if you want to come sit down. You're welcome.
It literally worked a half hour.
That's how it goes.
Wonderful, thank you, Robin. So if you would advance to the slide, yeah, for outcomes. So our outcomes for this evening's presentation is to first communicate the alignment between the Minnesota Human Rights Act, Policy 508, and the LGBTQIA+ History and Culture Resolution. Our second outcome is to provide a progress update on the implementation of the LGBTQIA+ History and Culture Resolution. And our third outcome is to share next steps for the work that is considered in progress for this year. So without further ado, we'll jump right into it, and I'll pass it to General Counsel Amy Moore.
Thank you, Director, Superintendent. I'll start with a high-level, not exhaustive overview, focusing on state law and district policy. So first, with Minnesota state law, I'll provide you a chronology. Starting in the 1950s, the state prohibited discrimination based on people's identities. In the 1960s, the Minnesota State Act Against Discrimination then became Minnesota Human Rights Act, which is what we know it today, and it prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex. While that should be enough, the state needed to clarify what that really meant. You'll see in the 70s, they clarified it meant that you can't deny credit on the basis of sex. In the 80s, they talked about that you can't discriminate based on, pay based on sex either. And then in 1993, further clarified that discrimination based on sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity or gender expression is prohibited. Then in 2014, the state was looking at its bullying policies applicable, of course, to school districts, and decided that what they had was not enough. And so that is when the state enacted the Safe and Supported School Act, prohibiting bullying based on a variety of protected categories, including sex, gender orientation, and expression. So that's kind of a very quick overview of Minnesota state law. And if you look, the district also had a kind of a similar progression. while discrimination based on sex was, always prohibited, there is the need for both the state and the district to kind of clarify what that means, to make sure everyone has a similar understanding. While I did not have an exhaustive understanding of the district's policies, this is what I could pull up, is in 1985, Policy 8410, Equal Education Employment Opportunity, was adopted in compliance with Minnesota law prohibiting discrimination based on sex. 1994, Policy 8410 was updated to include revisions that sexual discrimination based on sexual orientation was also prohibited in alliance with Minnesota State Human Rights Act. And then in 2000, Policy 8410 was revised to become what is now Policy 102, and that's the prohibition against discrimination, harassment, and violence, with what we call kind of the EEO Act. Next slide. I'll just keep going. For the district in 2006, Policy 514, bullying and hazing prohibition was adopted based on sex and sexual orientation. In the 2010s, Policy 102 was updated to its current title, saying prohibition against discrimination, harassment, and violence. And then things kind of stayed until 2021, when Policy 102 was updated to prohibit discrimination based on sex, gender identity, and expression. Again, in alignment with the updates that the Minnesota Human Rights Act had done. And then in 2021, Policy 508, gender inclusion, was adopted by the board, which provides definitions on gender identity, expression, and a clarification that different treatment based on gender identity and expression is prohibited. So now we'll talk a little bit more about Policy 508, which establishes that common language and understanding of what it means to prohibit discrimination based on gender identity expression. It provides education and expectations and requires consultation and accountability. So first, for the common language and understanding, Policy 508 provides definitions of gender, what is protected against discrimination, harassment, and violence, such as respecting all regardless of gender identity or expression, using aligned names and pronouns, that use aligned restrooms, and participation on co-curricular and extracurricular activities. The aspects of these expectations is in line with the Minnesota State Human Rights Act prohibiting discrimination. What this does is it allows us to all have a common understanding of what it means to prohibit discrimination based on sex, gender identity. The policy also, key, I think, directs the district to consult with students, parents, and guardians in the implementation and resulting accountability. The outcome of that consultation then is what is reflected in the board's June 2021 LGBTQIA plus history and culture board resolution, which provides the board direction on how to implement Policy 508.
Thank you, Board Directors, Superintendent, good evening. My name is Dwayne Wardali, Director of Educational Equity, he, him, his pronouns. I will be speaking to the 10 action items present in the LGBTQIA plus history and culture resolution. We can go to the next slide. Thank you so much, Robin. And I'll start with action item A1, the declaration of June as Pride Month in our district. This is clearly aligned to support policies and practices to center and affirm members of our LGBTQIA plus community. Notably, this action item connects to our district identity-based harm protocol, which was in the works prior to this resolution. It's a guide for any student to report harm. We will be highlighting more on this later. Item 2, we recommit to practices that protect and affirm. So our affinity spaces for our scholars and our LGBTQIA+ community are about creating safe affinity space. This action item speaks to our LGBTQIA+ scholars, or those who are strong allies. The professional development in this item is to protect and affirm our LGBTQIA+ community at an adult level. Our student affinity space is to protect and affirm our LGBTQIA+ community at the student level. We can go to the next slide. Robin. Action item A3. The LGBTQIA+ advisory and affinity groups. The advisory group provides and serves to make recommendations to the Office of the Cabinet for review with each one of these 10 action items. The LGBTQIA+ affinity group is a safe space for staff across the district to affirm and protect their lived experiences. A4, this speaks specifically and directly to an intersectional approach. So we have to center the word intersection, which is very much about identity. That is race, that is culture, that is identity, and all intersections within. We can advance to the next slide. A5. This is specifically learning work for our district. It is connected to district performance and informing our progress with LGBTQIA+ disparities. And again, this is learning work as we are being mindful of tracking data and working with resources such as Minnesota Student Survey. A6. This pertains to gender-neutral restrooms and locker room spaces for privacy. This is a part of our district LTFM, which stands for our long-term facility maintenance plan. We are doing this work as stated within our Minnesota legislation. We can advance to the next slide. Thank you, Robin. A7. This connects specifically to our LGBTQIA+ community and lessons that highlight and honor both the history and contributions of our LGBTQIA+ community. A8, this is learning work, specifically about working with various partners, including with the MDE, and providing resources to our families and caregivers within our district. We can advance to the next slide. These are the last 2 action items in this 10 item resolution. A9. This is with reference to the recommendation made from the LGBTQIA+ advisory to the Cabinet in the spring of 2023. The Office of the Superintendent in the spring of 2023 approved the recommendation to fly the Progress Pride flag from June 1st at all district buildings indefinitely. A10, this is actually what we're doing right now. This is the annual progress report to the Osseo School Board at this school board work session. We can advance to the next slide. Thank you so much, Robin. This is going to be two slides that speak to the flow maps of our LGBTQIA+ affinity group work and to our advisory group work. We're going to start with the advisory group work. Just as a clear FYI, you'll see 2 different colors to the slide. On the dark blue, it designates LGBTQIA+ advisory group meetings. The light purple are meetings that were either board facing or leader facing. So we'll just start in June 2022 with the LGBTQIA+ History and Culture Resolution that passed. And subsequently, in September, all learning leaders learned about the district implementation steps for the LGBTQIA+ History and Culture Resolution timeline. Moving forward from that, February 2023 was when we had our very first virtual advisory group meeting. In March, we followed up with an in-person meeting. In April 2023, we had our Gender Inclusive Schools Foundational module that took place with site leaders and DLTL department leads. And the two outcomes of that module were to continue building awareness within our school leadership about our LGBTQIA+ community and center our resolution commitment to belonging and inclusion. That's with regards to our scholars, staff, and community stakeholders. Last two LGBTQIA+ advisory meetings took place during the month of May. We can advance to the next slide. Thank you so much, Robin. This is the flow map of the LGBTQIA+ affinity group. And one piece of information that I forgot to share is that we have over 60 members that are actually a part of the advisory group. And within one of our events with the affinity group, we had close to 55 members attend. So June, starting with the resolution one more time, and September, similarly to the previous flow map, that was about discussing implementation steps for the history and culture, LGBTQIA+ history and culture resolution timeline. We had our first LGBTQIA+ affinity group meeting in March, followed by April. A LGBTQIA+ affinity group meeting during Systems Day in April. And we wrapped up the year in May with our last LGBTQIA+ affinity group meeting. Appreciate your time. I'm now going to hand it over to Robin Gonzalez, Director of Learning and Achievement. Thank you so much.
Good evening. I will be speaking, the next two slides I'll be speaking to talk about our progress towards the LGBTQIA resolution, things that we've completed, and then also things that are in progress right now. Some of the items that I'll be sharing are the items that Dwayne has touched upon, but I'll be going a little bit more in depth with it. So as we begin, the first is instructional resources. So during September, the September Learning Leader meeting, building principals met and along with district leaders to deepen their understanding of the LGBTQIA resolution, focusing on pronouns and terminology in the resolution. In January, building principals and district leaders engaged in an activity called Leading in the Public Square. This activity helped leaders unpack perspectives related to the resolution. And then also in this category, based on feedback from learning leaders and the advisory group, the timeline for implementing actions in the resolution was modified in order to really emphasize this year on professional learning and building awareness for our site leaders. In the category of district stakeholders, an LGBTQ+ advisory group was created. Participation in the group was established through recommendations from site leaders. And as Drew said, currently, this group has 60 members and includes students, parents, staff, and community members. Also in this category, an LGBTQIA+ staff affinity group was created. Participation in this group is voluntary, and it provides staff with a psychologically safe environment to discuss their experiences as staff members in our system. The third category, staff development, speaks to our partnership with Gender Inclusive Schools. We are looking at Gender Inclusive Schools modules, and we're customizing their modules to create learning experiences that meet our district objectives and needs. Social and emotional support is the last category. In this category, we continue our work on the identity-based harm protocol, which is, as Dwayne said, a guide to help our leaders respond when any student experiences harm due to their race, culture, or being a member of the LGBTQIA community. The Pride Progress flag was displayed at all district sites, and student-led LGBTQIA affinity groups across all high schools met. These groups are voluntary and focus on connection and inclusion in a positive climate. The next slide is the progress we've made towards our actions in progress towards the LGBTQIA resolution. In the first category, instructional resources, we will build the capacity of high school staff to support learning experiences that honor history and highlight the contributions of transgender, gender expansive, and non-binary people during the designated Pride Month. We will also research instructional materials to design a lesson to use during Pride Month that honors the history and highlights the contribution of the LGBTQIA community. And we will pilot these materials to get feedback from stakeholders. Students and parents will have the option to opt out of any lesson that is created. In the category of district stakeholders, we will continue the facilitation of the LGBTQIA advisory group, provide an annual school board update to continue to support the LGBTQIA staff affinity group. In the third category, staff development, we will continue to partner with gender and inclusive schools to design our own learning opportunities that will deepen the high school staff capacity to support students and deliver lessons that will be used during the designated Pride Month. We will also partner with the Minnesota Department of Education in a cohort designed to examine best practices to create safe and welcoming schools for the LGBTQIA+ scholars and staff. And the last category on this slide focuses on social emotional support. In this category, we will implement the identity-based harm protocol that was created last year. As Dwayne mentioned, and I mentioned earlier, that this is a guide to help site leaders respond when any student is harmed due to their race, culture, gender, or being a member of the LGBTQIA community. We will also continue to support student-led LGBTQIA affinity groups across secondary sites to provide students with a safe, inclusive, and positive environment. Next, we'll turn it over to Adriana.
Hi, my name is Adriana. I'm a current senior at Park Center Senior High, and just to talk about like my experience, I guess, before and after the passing of this resolution. So just for like some context, in 9th grade, I was in online school technically, so I was technically in District 279 online. And that was like the first time in my like entire time in school that I ever heard anything relating to LGBTQ plus community ever mentioned in curriculum. And it was in my health class. During the sex ed unit, my teacher was going through a slideshow, and one of the slides had the definition for homosexuality and bisexuality. And that was it. Went on to like the next slide after that. And that was all there was. So next year I go back to in-person school my sophomore year, and it was really different, like the experience, having to interact with other students again. And I had a lot of bad experiences when I went back with other students. A lot of like slurs being used in the hallway. It got to like the point where I had to like have earbuds in anytime I was walking in the hallway with like music blasting so I didn't hear what other people were saying. And that was just terrible. To speak to like some of my friends' experiences, a lot of them were scared to go in like their preferred bathrooms because the only like gender neutral bathroom we had then was like in the nurse's office. So they'd either have to go with the nurse or they would have to break their way into like one of the two bathrooms. And that was really scary for them because there were threats of violence sometimes. They were worried they were going to get jumped if they went into the boys' bathroom. So that just kind of like shocked me and like really hurt my heart a bit to hear that people aren't safe at school or they don't feel safe to go into the bathroom that they identify with. It's just kind of heartbreaking to me. So kind of we get to the time like last year, this year, when the resolution was passed. There's a new class at Park Center called LGBTQ plus literature, and I took that class this year, and it was probably one of my favorite classes I've ever taken. And it was just so nice to see myself represented in curriculum. I had never really had that before, to be able to go into class and learn about successful and powerful queer people was just like really inspiring, and I feel like every student deserves to have themselves like displayed in curriculum to have someone that they can identify with. So that's kind of my general experience. I was a part of the GSA at Park Center as well, and that was a really good space. It was just some place that some students don't feel safe going to because of kind of like threats of violence too. Like if you go into this classroom, like people know where it is, people know what classroom, what time it is. They're scared to go in because now they're going to be out to the whole school. You don't know what's going to happen once you leave that classroom. So that's kind of that.
Do you want to speak to the quotes that are?
Absolutely. Just two quotes from, and again, thank you so much for sharing your experience, Adriana. Really appreciate that. And I'm just going to speak to two quotes that were captured from students during the 21-22 school year regarding their experiences. 22-23 school year regarding their experiences here with Osseo area schools, in particular after the passing of the LGBTQIA plus history and culture resolution. Quote, the LGBTQIA plus class and the GSA club have made a huge difference for me in terms of support. Because of these two things, I know who I can go to when I need help. This is from one of our scholars who have protected their identities. Second quote, I like it when staff use preferred names and pronouns. Second, Osseo area school scholar. So with that.
Okay. Are there any questions from board members?
I just want to say, Adriana, thank you for coming and sharing your experience. We always love hearing from scholars, so that is very helpful. Thank you. And I hope things get better. So.
Yes, are we directing our questions to Brian?
Yeah, so to whichever speaker, if it, if it's to Ms. Moore on the legal part.
Okay. Yeah, just wondering when it was said, I think Robin was saying that the process for opting out or communicating to teachers, I guess the first question is, when will this curriculum or content be communicated to the teachers and staff? And what grade levels?
So for this year, there was a recommendation that has been made by the advisory group to, as the action item, is it 7? Action item 7. Establish a full month before June. There's a recommendation for April to be that month, and this year we would develop the materials for grades 9 through 12 for high school, and so those materials will be developed, piloted in our professional development around those lessons will be provided to the high school staff in advance of that month. We have 2 opportunities to do that, one in November, one at the end of January, and then we would be communicating in advance of that month to families to be able to opt out for those lessons during that month.
And Board Member Mitchell, if it's okay if I jump in, Dr. Bass, our goal as well as after this meeting is to also communicate to our building staff, our administration and our staff on precisely our next steps and what we will be doing and exactly what that training will look like, of pronouns of what we'll be doing with them. And our goal will be able to as well create a FAQ sheet as well so that parents, stakeholder, community members also understand what our next steps and what we're working towards.
Will that curriculum, the lesson planning, be completed consistent with our other standards and protocol of curriculum development?
So our lessons for any time that we recognize culture, be it Asian American Pacific Islander Month, African American Black History Month, or National Native American Heritage Month, all of those resources and materials are provided to teachers in the form of lessons, and then they're able to integrate those within the month or weeks that those cultures are celebrated or recognized nationally. And so we'd be following the same format that we would use for those other celebrations throughout the year.
Okay, so to clarify, in the resolution, when it describes gender-affirming curriculum, what is currently to be implemented is specific to just lessons related to the cultural celebration, consistent with other cultural celebrations. It is not, there are not lessons beyond that, there's not curriculum beyond that.
Correct, yeah,
No.
we have not determined as a district what we have a definition that we have developed that we need more input on that defines what we mean by gender-affirming curriculum, that it avoids bias, and that it doesn't that it doesn't commit historical inaccuracies or misrepresent people or represent people negatively. So we see that as that when our curriculum does that, it's inclusive of all. So, but we're not there with that being like the official approved. It's one that we're developing. So we're not able to say that we're not at the point in our learning work where we're ready to pilot gender-affirming curriculum as an official.
Gender-affirming instructional resources.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Did you want to share the definition, Robin?
Yeah, so
Gender-affirming?
this is one that as Dr. Bass was just saying, this is one that we're learning about and feeling like what we want to do is we want all of our curriculum to be identity-affirming curriculum so that all of our representation of any people, no matter what, is people are portrayed in a positive, accurate way. And so when we think about, which we've tried to do in our other curricular areas regarding race and regarding, we just talked a lot about our Indigenous lessons, making sure that our curriculum, the regular curriculum, like our ELA curriculum and math curriculum, social studies and science curriculum, portray all people in that identity-affirming way. So one of the definitions, as Dr. Bass was saying, that we are talking and learning about for gender-affirming curriculum would just be another part of that identity-affirming curriculum. It would be lessons that avoid bias, that include positive representation of the LGBTQIA plus community, and also accurate representations of history and events that have happened in the community. So that's it. But we're really thinking about this in a holistic way and making sure that our students can see themselves in our curriculum in a positive light instead of some of the traditional inaccuracies that we presented in learning history.
And as you said, that's consistent with our work to ensure that's the case for all peoples of all backgrounds and all the ethnicities.
That's correct. That's correct.
And so this does not include the instructional practices, teaching practices, that is also in the resolution. Because I didn't see that in here, so that's not yet in, is that in learning?
The gender-affirming pedagogy or practices, is that what you're talking about? And those are, I think, those follow along with the identity-affirming curriculum. Is we want to do practices and instructional strategies that affirm all of our students and make sure that they feel welcome in our school, so that without bias, without historic inaccuracies.
Okay.
And so just to clarify, for 23-24 this school year, you're saying there will not be any changes with what you're addressing for below grade 9? Is that
That's correct.
correct? And it's only, you're only talking about advisory classes? Is that what I'm hearing at high school level? Or
We
what
haven't
teachers?
confirmed which staff members would be facilitating the lessons yet. So we'll have to get input from our leaders across the district for that, at the high school level.
And the advance, how will parents be communicated? Will this be aligned with the advance notice that they, 6 weeks advance notice, or what will be the process and the timeline, and how will parents be?
So our board policy for opt-out, I don't have it in front of me, so I don't have it memorized. Robin, are you familiar with the length of time for opt-out?
I believe it is, I believe you're correct, I believe it is 6 weeks. So
Okay.
we would want to do at least that time frame, if not.
Okay.
Okay. And will that come in like an email, or how would parents be?
I'm looking at Dr. Heil.
I would assume it would be how normally principals would normally send it out. So I don't know if it's just via,
Email or.
and secondary, don't they do student email, parent email?
Schoology notification.
Schoology, yeah.
We want to communicate the best way we can and really take the lead from our sites, but I would imagine multiple types of communication, so.
So we would connect with building administrators, of course, and say, what's the best way that we do shoot out that information to our parents and use all those venues in which they advise us with, consistent between all of our 9 through 12s.
And we've been hearing emails from teachers. When will there be a time of a listening session? You know, we've been hearing from the lived experience of teachers that are really struggling with having enough time in their day to handle core curriculum. So, you know, just a part of transparency and building bridges and working with staff, you know, what they have their limitations throughout their day, how will we be hearing from what the teachers are really able to handle and being on board with that?
We see the professional development in 2 waves. The first wave providing the foundational awareness of definitions, terms, right, and getting input on their capacity and comfort facilitating lessons. And then we see the second wave being actually that, presenting the lessons and talking through their capacity and their confidence and being able to facilitate those lessons and working through those perspectives in the second wave. So really see it in 2 ways. One, providing this foundational knowledge, and then the second one being about what's the specific skill needed to facilitate these lessons, and then working with them through that, right, as those concerns are presented.
Okay, so which time, as we encourage teachers that they are heard and they do, when would be the time that their input and feedback is a safe time to
So
share that?
during the professional development.
In November, or we don't know yet?
Well, we don't have that yet.
Well, we know that we have multiple opportunities in advance of if the cabinet approves April, which is a recommended month, we know that we have ample opportunity to provide at least 2 trainings to support our staff at the high school level with those 2 waves.
Okay, and as those dates are decided, will that be communicated through your department or Dr. Heil, or how will the board be informed?
So our Learning and Achievement Department communicates all of the professional development out to all of our licensed staff, right? And provides that menu of here are all the offerings for our staff at the various levels, pre-K, elementary, middle school, high school, as well as special ed. Well, not special ed staff, but regular ed staff. And then our Student Services Department provides the updates for our staff who are supporting special ed services.
Was the question, School Board Member Mitchell, once those dates are clarified, or when the board will know?
Right, the dates and the content, you know, as we also have questions from teachers and staff that they want, you know, there shouldn't be any confusion of us knowing that we should all be informed.
Sure, so you just
Right.
want to know the dates of when the PD will be and the content of the PD?
Right,
I just want to
right,
make sure I'm
right,
understanding.
right, just so
Yeah,
there's not
got it.
confusion between,
Mhm.
as board members, we're talking to parents, staff, principals, you know, like I loved in your interview when you said there shouldn't be ever wondering what's the why, or why, you know, the why as a parent, as a school board member, as a principal, we just don't want any confusion. We want to be very, very clear.
Sure. We'll make sure the board
Transparent.
gets that.
Is that standard practice to notify the board about professional development?
Well, this is a board-driven resolution, so it seems to make sense that as a board-driven resolution, providing direction that as part of the updates. I think we've generally, if we've inquired about professional development, we've received information on it. We've talked about recently the board participating in the equity training that's available to the staff.
And generally going back, you had mentioned, like the staff was saying, when would that be done? So I'm new to OSCEO, so I can only share from my other experience. But generally, when you are having, there's several different types of month, where there's women's month or Asia Pacific month, that a lot of times in secondary, I do want to warm, I'm elementary by trade, but that it can be done during advisory. So it rarely does these, I shouldn't say rarely, but most of the time for secondary is done with advisory, so you're not taking away from other parts of core classes. So we would work with administration on that, I would assume, to see where they could fit it in there.
So I think this is helpful. It's been a year since this resolution passed, and so this is the first time that we've had the opportunity to discuss it. So I appreciate the opportunity to ask a lot of questions, and there's been a lot of community engagement and questions on it. So I know that we submitted some questions in advance as well, so I appreciate that we're able to take this time to ask the questions that we have. So I appreciate that. Does anybody have other questions?
I just wanted to clarify, one in the presentation when it's called learning leaders, are all staff learning leaders or who are learning leaders?
I'm sorry, I should have clarified that. Those are our site leaders, our principals, assistant principals, and district leaders. So that would be the directors, coordinators of the different DLTL departments, along with, I think
That's it.
Okay.
Administration.
And
Okay, and I guess that's what the transparency part I want to avoid is when I've been talking to certain principals and they're confused and as a board member, I want to be informed because that, does not build that trust when, as a parent, as a board member, as a principal, there should be that fluid transparency of, none of us are confused. We're all very clear. So that's just what I'd love to keep building that trust and communication between the community.
I had some questions on the legal portion. So on slide 15, there's a statement that this is compliant with Minnesota Human Rights Act, another board policy. So I don't, from what's required by law versus what was added to this doesn't necessarily parse that out. And so, for example, there's not a legal requirement for gender-affirming curriculum. So I think what this bullet point is to the spirit of ensuring there's not discrimination or harassment. I just wanted to clarify that.
Right, it's the idea that, we have Minnesota state law, our policies, comply with that. With the gender inclusion policy, there was the component of, communicating with a group of parents and such. And then the resolution appeared to be how it was going to be implemented. But to your point, every single point isn't necessarily legally, it's just how are you going to move forward ensuring that, people are treated with respect.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the second point in terms of the definition of gender, as I recall the resolution, that wasn't a legal definition from legislation or the Human Rights Act. That was a definition within the resolution that the board passed. Okay. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. On number 5, when we talk about tracking measures, there's particular legal parameters or what type of questions that we can ask students and survey them on. So one of the things that I want to seek clarity on is, are we asking students to self-identify their gender? Like, are we asking them, what is your gender identity in the classroom?
No.
Okay, so I just wanted to be clear because that's a significant data element. Are we asking students for their pronouns via Google Forms in the classrooms or other mechanisms?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, so right now, if a parent were to identify or a student identify that they are being asked either on paper or via a Google form to provide their pronoun, that would not be in line with district policy, or it would be?
We don't have a policy, but we actually have a policy
Or
that says
practice.
that we should be respecting
Yes.
how folks want to be identified. And so if there is a preferred pronoun that is introduced, that we would respect the request for the preferred pronoun. I'm not sure I'm understanding the question.
I'm new, so I'm trying to figure it out as well. So is there something where when our babies fill out their name, is there something optional of what you want your pronoun to be?
The only assessment that asks about how students identify beyond what we in public education is the Minnesota Student Survey. that the state of Minnesota administers, and there are questions there that do ask students to, they have the option to identify or not.
And that's the Minnesota Student Survey, which is provided opt-out, and it's a yes, yeah. Okay, so, you know, we want to ensure that everybody is respected and their identity is respected, and as part of our I think it's in both our policy and the resolution, students who inform their teacher of their preferred pronoun, it is incumbent upon our staff members to utilize that preferred pronoun. But there is no solicitation from staff or from teachers of students' preferred pronouns.
Staff are not directed to solicit.
Okay, so if that is the
information
case,
from scholars, they're not directed to solicit that.
but they're not prohibited.
No.
So they may administer a survey or
We haven't
No,
provided
no, we
that
don't.
language. We haven't provided that language or direction to or not to. We haven't provided that direction.
So Vice Chair Simons, are you saying in an assessment, or are you just saying in a
At the beginning of the year.
form, what they may fill out? So
Yes.
not an assessment,
Are there
but you're
any-
saying that there's a form of when they put the information, who they are, is that the optional there to fill out?
Yes, because that's been raised as a question by parents to understand if that's a practice in our district, and I'd like to clarify if that's a practice, if that's within the parameters of this resolution, what is acceptable practice in asking students to provide their pronouns to their teacher or to staff
I
members.
mean, I'm turning to Robin from.
I don't think we haven't declared any kind of practice one way or the other at this point. Our training has really been focused on leaders, as we said, principals and district leaders. Around this, I know that at the beginning of the school year, several teachers do do you have a nickname that you want to be called? What's your favorite? You know, what are some things that you want me to know about you, or what are your favorite things that you like, or how do you like to learn? Those kinds of things. So I don't know. I haven't seen any part of that asking for pronouns in that kind of a format. I'm not saying that it's not happening. We haven't given any kind of direction on that.
So the question would be to follow, if I'm understanding correctly, is there some type of form at the beginning of the year, or when a student, one of the babies are filling out a form, is there something optional there if they want to provide pronouns? Or is it because of where we live now, you're saying is there some staff members that may go, what's your name and what's your pronoun? Or what we say, because there is no actual district procedure or policy that's there, but we're going a little bit deeper, so we're asking if a classroom teacher, an individual may ask that.
Yes.
Is that what it is?
Yes.
Okay.
And we're saying we don't know the answer to that.
We're saying we haven't provided direction to staff.
We have not provided
that
direction to staff
Either promotes nor
to ask.
discourages, right?
Yeah.
It neither promotes nor discourages.
Well,
Yeah.
would we require a student to answer a Google form about what their favorite color is, or where they went on vacation for the summer? I mean, a getting to know you thing is something that teachers probably send out to provide students the opportunity to give information that may or may not include their pronouns. But what I think, if I understand correctly here, that there is no district policy that requires any staff member to ask anyone what their pronouns are, but that asking or having a student provide those pronouns is in alignment with accepting and affirming the identity of each and every student. Do I have that correct?
So it is acceptable practice then that asking a question, their student their nickname or get to know you questions, that it is acceptable practice to ask students their pronouns.
Vice
as well.
Chair Simons, we cannot
Yeah.
say that. We
Okay.
cannot say from a district level if that's an acceptable practice, because we think that we have over 4,000 employees. We don't know. We have not said from district level this is an acceptable practice to ask that. But if individuals ask it, just like we were saying, what's your favorite ice cream, or where's your pizza you like, that may be happening. But there is nothing coming from district level that is making someone, unless there's a forum out there, and I said, we'll find that out. But it's saying that you should ask someone their pronoun.
Okay. The reason why I'm asking is because some families are not comfortable with their students being asked their pronoun. And so that is why I'm trying to clarify our practice, about what we direct, what is considered acceptable practice, what is standard practice. That is the reason why I'm asking the clarifying
Nope,
question.
that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's,
But we will
that's the
find out for
information.
the board if there's an application or something that's there as well. So.
Okay, yeah, if it's possible to clarify that. Again,
Yeah, sure.
that's the purpose of my question. On action item 9, the specific language in the resolution is to raise the LGBTQIA plus progress flag on June 1st at all district buildings and in the school board. And Mr. Wardley, I heard you say that you used the word indefinitely when you read this earlier in the meeting. So can you tell me what authorization or what decision was made from the district to take it from on June 1st to indefinitely? And is this the only identity-based flag that is raised in our buildings?
So the advisory, I'm going to answer this one. The advisory group met to discuss action items and prioritization of action items based on a timeline. What needs more work? What needs more runway for us to study and understand how to do this thoughtfully and strategically? When it came to raising the Progress Pride flag, there was a lot of discussion, and a recommendation was made to the cabinet and to the office of the superintendent to raise the Progress Pride flag and in respect of flag etiquette for our country, alongside sovereign nation flags that are displayed in a number of our buildings, either in the media center, the cafeteria. There's a lot of different ways in which you find flags, sovereign nation flags flown, and the recommendation was made to fly the flag consistent with flag etiquette in the same space as tribal nation flags. So that recommendation was made to the office of the superintendent, and our previous superintendent and the cabinet had that discussion and supported the recommendation and approved the recommendation to move forward with flying the Progress Pride flag indefinitely.
And there's more flags, if I'm correct, Dr. Bass, that are present in some of our schools. You want to share that?
Yeah.
So, if I'm understanding, still learning, in some of our schools as well, that we have flags that are displayed for where some of our babies are from other countries.
Absolutely, yeah. Other
Right,
sovereign
so we'll
nation,
have-
sovereign
yeah.
nation flags, right? So we,
Yeah.
for example, at Park Center, our International Baccalaureate program promoted actually identifying many of the different home countries of our scholars, and so many of those flags are present and displayed throughout their buildings, and a number of other schools have replicated that practice as well.
Of sovereign nation flags?
Right.
Are there other identity flags or symbols that are common that we include?
Off the top of my head, I'm not able to identify, what other identity-based specific flags are flown.
So if there was a interest in having the opportunity for other identity-based flags or symbols, what would be the process to request that same equal treatment?
I think that's a question that we'd have to take back and look at our policy around that. This is a board-approved resolution
Right.
that gave us this direction,
Okay.
so that's why we're doing it.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
So a board-approved document
Yes.
gave us that direction, so I think we'd have to go to a board policy to understand how other groups, if they wanted to promote the display of other identity-based flags, would be flown. We'd have to look at what board policy informs that.
Okay. Yeah, and that's a really good clarification that these specific actions were based on resolution versus other traditional means of decision-making and recommendation processes.
And can you help me understand, just because this resolution was passed before I was on the board, so I just never want there to be confusion within our stakeholders. When did the wording change? Because again, I'm all about building trust and transparency within our stakeholders. When did the wording change, though? That's confusing to me, the wording of the pride flag being raised on June 1st to moving to indefinitely. Just we want to be very clear about that. I think that's confusing to me, so if you can help me understand.
So the advisory group in action item 3, right, serves to provide recommendations to the district on how to thoughtfully and strategically implement aspects of the action items. So the recommendation for the Progress Pride flag came in as an adaptation of this language to not raise and lower the flag each year, but to indefinitely display it. That was the recommendation that came in, and the superintendent and the office of the superintendent approved that recommendation.
Okay. So Dr. Heil and the cabinet approved?
No, I wasn't
Superintendent
here.
Superintendent.
Okay, well, that's why, I just want us to be very clear, so when we say we're gonna do something, we do it the way it's written. So I'm still a little bit confused. So anything that the advisory committee recommends will be brought to
The
Dr. Heil?
superintendent and the office of the superintendent to review and to determine whether or not that recommendation would be approved or not.
Does the advisory committee also have the ability to advise the board?
Through recommendations.
Okay, through the same process?
Right,
That-
through
okay.
recommendations. Yeah. I mean,
To clarify,
To-
it's an advisory board
the-
like any
advisory-
other.
The information isn't new, that the office of the superintendent approved this. It was communicated by Superintendent McIntyre to the board in an email prior to us informing the entire community. It was a message that went out to the entire community, and prior to that, it was shared with the board. I just want to.
That is correct. The board was informed of a decision that was modifying the original language of
Under
the resolution.
Superintendent McIntyre.
Yes,
That was communicated this spring.
yes.
So anything that any advisory committee in the district brings for something to be moved forward needs to be approved by the superintendent? Is that what I'm
Right,
hearing?
so we have many committees that come before and make recommendations, and we review those. Some of those align to our district operational plan and the work that we have prioritized. Some of them aren't there, and they might get placed into learning work down the road, or we may not have the resources or strategic investment capacity to invest in those at that time. But we do consider them.
So I appreciate the timeline that's shown as far as the passage to our other efforts that involve policy, have first readings and second readings. In this process illustrates that it began with the vote by the board. There were no previous work sessions on this resolution. So in terms of the public first becoming aware of this resolution, it was in the board packet for the June 21st meeting. So this is a little bit of a atypical timeline for significant decisions in the school district, which I'm glad that we're having this discussion now and the clarity as to what is included and how it's being implemented, because again, it was passed in a board meeting without previous in-depth work session like our other significant decisions and recommendations. We typically would have the district bring us recommendations, options, there'd be detail as to implementation, and this just was a little different, which is why I appreciate the comments, Dr. Howell, in terms of communication, ensuring that there's good communication on going forward, because a full year has really passed before we've dove into what this means and doesn't mean, which opens the door for a lot of questions and confusion and a lack of clarity. So again, I appreciate that this is the opportunity to drive clarity, and that is, from my perspective, the purpose for my questions is for clarity on this, especially since this is the first public conversation we've had on it. When I have a question on slide 27 under district stakeholders. So as we think about consultation about this work and stakeholder feedback, are the only stakeholders providing feedback on this work the LGBTQIA plus advisory and affinity group, or are there other stakeholders providing perspective, and can you share about that?
Yeah, so Robin also acknowledged that our learning leaders have given us, and that group consists of our principals, assistant principals, and our district leaders have given us input from their staff, from input from parents in their community that have expressed concerns about pacing and really understanding the intent of each of the action items, to the point you just made about needing as much transparency about the steps and the timeline that we're taking. And so I think this is our first opportunity to be able to share beyond the updates that you all have been provided as a board, or communication that has gone out in advance of displaying the Progress Pride flags. So we are stewards of those perspectives that come in, and we have modified to emphasize learning, building consciousness, awareness, and making sure that as we roll this out, we start with high school, and then we establish it there. Then we go to middle school, we establish it there. So those are things that we've modified based on input from our stakeholders.
Just for a point of clarity, there was a mention about not having any updates for a year. Did not Superintendent McIntyre send a massive update of all the updates of the LGBTQIA resolution May-ish?
Yes, we've had informs to the board in email. We haven't had a public discussion together.
Okay, so there hasn't been a public discussion and a work session, just to clarify.
There's been informs. We haven't been invited to have this as a topic in a meeting. It's been listed on learning work, and we've asked some questions at that time, yes.
Oh.
So on page 27, as you were walking through the information about building awareness and deepening staff capacity, you mentioned being able to support students. One of the community questions and parental questions and concern has been, what does support students mean, and what does that mean about staff or teachers discussing gender identity with individual students? And the basis of my question is certainly identity in all elements is kind of a sacred component of who we are. And wanting to accurately reflect that is certainly what we want to do in our work for everybody. But knowing that there's a lot of different perspectives on what gender identity means from different communities and from different faiths and just humanness, there's been a desire for clarity on what does that mean for when my child is at school. What are the boundaries around what supporting a student looks like, or discussing their individual personal identity, in this case gender, because that's the topic before us, but it could apply to all elements of identity. What is appropriate support? What is that boundary? Yeah.
Okay, so we support all students,
Right.
each and every child. So it could be supporting a student who is apprehensive from coming to school, who may have separation anxiety from someone's family. They may be going through a divorce, to a loss of a pet, to anxiety over going to college or taking the ACT. We are born as educators to support our babies. That's what we do. So we're not necessarily going in and asking, are you this gender, or whatever that may be. As whether it's a counselor, most of the time they go to counselors, social workers, and things like that, right? But our babies connect with someone in school, and support may be just for them to be able to talk and just to be themselves. That does not mean we're influencing them. We may be simply stopping them from committing suicide. Okay, so that's all children, irregardless of what your identity is or whatever. If we're in education, I'm sorry I'm getting emotional, but we're in education, we're there to protect our kids. And so we're not going to sit there and brainwash you. We're not going to do that. We're going to listen to our kids and give them the support of where they need to go to be supported. And that's what I meant by that. I'm sorry if I got emotional, but it's, as I've been an educator for over 20 years, that's why we're in education. That's why we breathe. So whether a dog's been put down or whether it's grandma has died, we support, we listen, and we get them to the services that they need. That doesn't mean we don't contact parents. This is your child. This is your baby, right? So if something's happening with your child, the parent is going to know. The only time a parent is not going to know if for some reason that we think there's a child protection thing going on or something, right? But this is your child. You're borrowing your child, thank you, and allowing us to teach your child. But we're going to work with what that child needs, connect with that parent and say, these are the concerns. Here's some resources. Here's some counseling, or here's some areas that you can go get help. So I don't want it to identify it just as LGBTQIA+, because all of our babies need that support. Our little child is quiet in the classroom that doesn't say anything needs that support, because they're probably being ignored. Just saying.
Also,
So-
teachers have a professional, I'm sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, I'm good. I'm done.
Teachers have a professional ethics code, and there are levels of involvement. Teachers can support and educate, but we're not therapists.
Nope.
It's not our job to be counselors or therapists. And so if there's a situation where there's a kid struggling with their identity for any reason, my kids are mixed race, or their grandma died and they just have been around them all the time. Whatever they're struggling with, we would say, I support you, I love you, I care about you. Here's a therapist. Or, hello, mom, dad, your mom, whoever, grandma, whoever the adult is, your child is struggling in school, and they shared this with me. Do you need some resources? That's what teachers do. They're not there to indoctrinate or push my feelings or our politics on kids. We're there to support them where they're at, and to love on them, because if you don't love on them, then they're not going to learn anything, and to educate, not to therapize. Thank you.
I did have a similar question to that. I do like that when we talk about LGBTQ students, we are looking at providing resources and support to them, but not every LGBTQ student is in crisis.
Right.
And whether you are a kindergartner or a senior in high school, aspects of identity, whether it's your personal identity, your parents, your family, adults, a staff member, those elements can come out in everyday conversation. How did the weekend go? Who were you with? What were you doing? Whether that's in the classroom or that's in the hallway talking to other scholars. So I think the bigger question that I have, not looking at students that are in crisis, how are we supporting scholars every single day as these topics come up naturally? Yeah, so that's the question I have.
How are we supporting our LGBTQIA+?
Yeah, so if it's in a classroom circle and they're talking about family, if they're talking about their personal identity, their family, and I think the reason why I'm asking this question is we are looking at the content of the resolution, and whenever we talk about the LGBTQIA community as if it is some new concept, as if it just came out of thin air, and I think it was actually kind of mentioned at the last school board meeting that the LGBTQ community came out of nowhere. And so it hasn't come out of nowhere. It comes out in everyday conversation. I think what's important about the resolution is it highlights the fact that when you do identify as LGBTQIA or any identity, that there is a whole culture that comes with that. And with this community, there's a long and difficult history that comes behind it as well. And so for me, I want to know how we're supporting scholars right now as these things come up on a day-to-day basis. Not in crisis, but just a student introducing for the first time that they have two parents of the same sex, a student introducing for the first time with classmates or with a teacher that they have feelings for another student of the same sex, a student talking about a friend that may be struggling. How are we supporting students in those everyday situations, not just when they're in crisis?
Well, so when I was speaking to it, I wasn't speaking as in crisis. So just how we work with children period. So these, like you said, these conversations come up every day, and it's 2023, and it's not the first time we've had a mom and a mom, or a dad. So these conversations have been had. It's not like they haven't been had. So depending on what they're speaking of, or if they're having a discussion with, I'm trying to think of an example. I'm trying to make it not a crisis, because most of the time it's not a crisis. Yeah. I'm going to be honest, a lot of the problem is with adults. A lot of times our kids don't have a problem accepting each other.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to put that out there. So generally, if a child is speaking to another child, a child is a child. Okay, so when a child is speaking to another child, they may be queer, they may not be queer, they're not trying to indoctrinate each other. They're just being children, and they're talking and they're supporting. And if there's someone that is, may have had a run-in with something, not crisis, but in a lunchroom or something's been said, we're going to follow that process for if it's an incident, if there's bullying, or getting with a counselor, with a social worker, and we work with that child. Go ahead, Dr. Bass.
Yeah, I think we acknowledge that the resolution exists because our capacity as a system is developmental, right? We have many stakeholders many educators in our classroom who are far along in their understanding and proximity to our LGBTQIA community, and we have some who have a lot of distance and do not have the proximity, and we recognize that they're going to be at different places in leading this work, and we've heard from some of them in terms of their proximity that they haven't. And so part of our professional development is to build that capacity, to have awareness and to have consciousness, to be able to notice those pieces and be able to, as Dr. Heil said, direct them to the supports that are there for them. And I think our identity-based harm response protocol has already demonstrated, as we saw in many of the MSHS, the Minnesota State High School League sponsored events last year, we saw it have immediate impact in helping us in building capacity for our leaders and staff to respond to incidents when they occurred, so that we could be there for our scholars in those moments. So, but it is absolutely a learning curve, and we are on it, right? We are in it.
I think that's what I was getting at. I think, one of the reasons I think the resolution was created is because the experience of scholars is so inconsistent from classroom to classroom and building to building. But also I think it's important to highlight that these discussions already happen every single day. I hear about them even from my own kids and their friends. So these discussions are happening. They are talking about, or they do have the opportunity to talk about, at times, leaders or members of the LGBTQ community that have stepped up and been successful, or that have fought the fight in the past. Those things do come up naturally, and our hope is that this experience could be more consistent across sites and not just limited to those staff members that have that further understanding of the LGBTQ community. Yeah, so that was it.
Are there any other additional questions or comments?
I did have one question. I was curious about the MDE cohort. If you could talk a little more about that.
Yeah, I'm happy that you brought that up. We are one of 12 districts across the state that will be connected with each other over the course of this year, as this is a part of the work with the Minnesota Department of Education in centering, right, our LGBTQIA+ students, staff, and community. We will be one school district of 12. We have urban school districts, suburban, and rural districts. It is the first year, so I don't have a frame of reference to speak to what it looked like in years prior in terms of our participation. And moving forward, our gender affirming and LGBTQIA+ facing work. So it's our opportunity as a school district to simply be involved at the state level and thought partner also with districts. That's a beautiful opportunity with districts within the metro, but also within the greater state, because this is a state initiative.
I do just need to put out here, you guys got a new superintendent now, that with this work that the district staff is following the direction of the resolution. That's what we're doing. And we're trying to do it at our best, and we're trying to be neutral, and we're trying to make sure everyone's valued and heard. No one's going after anyone's values. No one's going after anyone's belief. We just want everyone's lived experiences valued. So you need to understand when you're in Osseo area schools, we're one community for all valued and heard. No one will, and I'll put on the record, enter our school district and be disrespected. No one's asking anyone to change a belief. All we're asking is that when that precious child walks into our setting, that they're going to be loved no matter what they look like, what they say, or what they do, because that's our job. That's all we're doing. So we're slowing down, not slowing down as in stopping, but we're slowing down to assess of what we're doing to make sure we're doing it correctly, doing it Osseo school way, not the gender neutral way, not the site way, not the learning way, but what we need at Osseo for us to begin and understand each other's lived experiences. And we hold space for each other. Because when we don't, harm happens, kids get hurt, staff gets hurt, and in Osseo area schools, that will not happen under my watch. So all we're saying is we're not going after your families, we're not going after your values, we're not going after your beliefs, but as our say on A, we need to have welcoming and inclusive learning environments, and that's for everything. That's for everyone, for all. And all means each and every. So I just needed to share that as a superintendent. We're not going after your values, but we will love our babies. We will love them all. And you don't have to change your belief systems. We just need to make sure they're safe and included. And as a district, we need to make sure we communicate, and communicate so that you understand that we're transparent and what we're doing, that we need to make sure we get that information out. That wasn't here, but we will work on that to ensure that you know, because they're your babies. Once again, thank you for sending them to us, that you know what we're doing when they're with us during those hours of the day. I should be talking to you.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah, go
Because
ahead,
along those
sweetheart.
lines, I have similar goals with you that, kind of your question too, Thomas, it's like how, at each elementary, middle school, high school, how are those basic core values of compassion, kindness, respect, listening first, like in line with your vision, how can that be implemented? Because that umbrellas everything. Is that school council, is that elementary? How can we incorporate that along with your vision, teaching? How can you see that being implemented in our daily experience of our teachers and staff?
I don't know daily what we do yet,
Okay,
but I would
dream
assume
big. Tell me
I was
something.
saying, you know, girl, I dream big. But I'm assuming from PBS and everything else that we do that. But the goal is eventually for us to learn to work together in holding space and understanding about each other's lived experiences, and us being able to look at each other as humans, regardless of what our belief system is outside of our district, that you must respect this house. I die on that. We must respect each other and take care of each other in our school district, and to do that. So I think eventually it'll get into our system and it'll move throughout the system. I'm sure the system is doing it already. We're teachers, come on. We love. but we'll work it through our system on how we do that. And the more that, I don't want to make it about me, but the more that we have that shared vision, the board's vision, what our mission is. I love our vision, unleash and enhance the brilliance of our scholars to thrive and change the world, right? If we want them to change the world, we got to make sure they know they have the power and encouragement to be able to do that, and that's our job. So it's not about me, but my vision is to just bring that love heart to head, to understand where we're at. We all know how to teach. but we got to make sure we're loving it. Everybody knows that they're important in the system that we're in. So the goal is work through the brilliant staff that we already have here and have it filtered all the way down to our pre-K's toes. So, so that's the goal. But yeah, but we're not going to step on anyone's belief systems. So I just wanted to share that since we had a crowd.
Well, thank you,
welcome.
Director Mitchell and Dr. Heil. I think that's exactly what we're all here for. I think when we look and move into our next segment of the strategic priorities, the values that this board set together, the strategic priorities that we set together, I think that's exactly what we all desire and are committed to in the district, is ensuring that everybody is valued and heard and has an environment to succeed and achieve their dreams, which is written right up here, right back there.
I have a comment.
Yes.
I just want to say thank you to Dr. Bass and Counselor Moore and Mr. Wadali and Ms. Gonzalez, and especially you, Adriana, for putting this work in front of us, for being as inclusive as possible. And I've been asking for a long time for the FAQs because I think when we don't know what's going on, the narrative gets filled in. And there are things that people are afraid we're going to do that we're never going to do. So I appreciate that, and I look forward to seeing the FAQs and a reminder that I appreciate your expertise, and I appreciate that you're looking at this from a developmental, holistic approach.
Great. With that, are we good moving on to our next item?
Yes. You need to stay, Dr. Bass. Do
Adriana,
they get to
if you
go?
want to go, you can. You can stay, but you can go if you want.
Dr. Bass, are you staying?
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Okay, we'll proceed on to our next item, Dr. Howell, with the strategic priorities.
Thank you. And Dr. Bass will join in with me as well. So you have a document in front of you that's our strategic priorities for 2023. So what this is an abbreviated strategic priorities from our actual larger operational plan, which has over, how many did you say, 28 items, Dr. Bass?
Last year, we had 28 items.
Yes. So we needed to have a tool in which we would be able to look at what our work is for the year, as well as a tool that actually helps me as a leader to be able, when I reach out at each sites and reach out to our operational team, of what our work is for the district. So we don't want someone to have to go through pages and pages of an operational plan. So our operational plan has areas A through E, and as I'm aware, Dr. Bass, they have been shared with the board, an update on each area.
So in our operational plan that the board may recall receiving, it is written in alignment with each of the strategic directions. And so 1 year at a time, we see each of the 5 strategic directions and the items that are placed in either learning work, implementation work, and those that are moving to standard work. There are a number of those items in that plan from last year that were placed in standard work that were things that were moving off because of COVID, where we were at with relationship to the pandemic preparedness work. You may recall seeing some of that.
So this just took a more of a high-level priority area in which we're working. Once again, you can read the document, so I apologize. In green are our learning work initiatives. Once again, what we're researching, what we're testing, what we want to continue to work on. Implementation is in blue. So what we're actually working on right now, what we are implementing, hope the successful implementation, and then we have standard work initiative that it just has become part of our district work. Did you want to comment at all on any of the green or blue?
Just as a reminder, right, the items that are in green, we haven't decided as a system that we're going to invest in them to implement them to standard work. They're ones that we're just researching and piloting, right? And the ones that are blue is that we've decided as a system to say we are going to implement this, and it may take 1 to 3 years in order to get it to standard work, but that's what the blue represents. I just want to be and this is our best representation. When we go up one level higher or the next level higher, when we think about those 28 items across these 5 strategic directions, what is the umbrella statement that reflects what those items are aligned with, how those items align with the strategic direction? So we've attempted to shrink it from 28 to 12 so that there isn't so much. So that was our attempt.
Any questions at all on the document?
This is a great document. I like that it really helps to kind of narrow in the focus.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's just 2 minutes. So, and like I said earlier, this will be shared throughout the district, so at all levels that everyone understands the work and the why behind our work to get done. So, which segues perfectly into our teamworks. Christine and Ray is here today. And all of the work that's been done on operational plan and strategic priorities just leads right into the board 1 and 3 year board plan. So Christine and Ray from Teamworks is going to help guide that work for what the board would like to see under, I guess, your own work plan or what you'd like to work on for the next year or so.
Can I ask a question, Dr. Hunt?
Sure.
Are these going to be up in buildings?
Do you want them up in? No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, I would suggest, as a teacher, to put on the back of the bathroom stalls in the teacher's room.
So they have been shared with
But-
all of our learning leaders, principals, assistant principals. Many of them will be sharing that
That in
document in their opening week workshops with staff. They were excited. We're opening up all of our data dig sessions, also includes this document. So we are.
Yeah, I'm just saying, as a teacher, sometimes that happens and it
Sure.
goes here.
Yeah, right.
And so if it's in staff rooms or, I mean, I don't have time to eat lunch in the lunchroom.
Keep it a live document.
Yeah,
is what
keep
you're
it,
saying.
you know,
Yeah.
somewhere where teachers can have to see it a lot.
Okay. Got it.
Because especially this nice, beautiful color, I think.
Brian's smiling.
Credit
Shucks.
to the team.
Oh,
Credit to the team.
shucks.
It was
Yeah.
a team for sure.
Okay. We can do that, so. Yep.
Ready?
Yep.
Well, I'm Christine Robleski with Teamworks.
I'm Ray Guino with Teamworks.
Thanks for having us this evening. It's nice to be back with you. I think the last time we saw you was at our July professional development, right? Where we
Yes.
talked about some of these things. He's going to help us out here. Some of we had multiple. So what we're going to cover in the roughly hour and a half that we have with you is to do just a little reminder on the role of governance, because your work plan is really around your authorities of governance, and we want to keep you in governance as a school board. So we're going to review the draft one-year plan that you've been working off of as a school board, I think for a couple of years now, with the one-year board plan. And we've been trying to get you toward a 3-year work plan, like your administrative team is working on a 3-year operational plan. Then we're going to discuss maybe some changes to the draft one-year plan that the superintendent has already shared with you, discuss some of the steps of developing at least an initial draft of that 3-year board governance plan, and then talk about next steps. And so we'll move on from there. So just before we get into that, you can skip ahead a few. There we go. The strategic plan structure and elements. So you had just talked about your strategic priorities, which are part of that operational plan. And these are just a reminder that under governance, the strategic roadmap, which the board approved a couple of years ago now, which sets the mission, the vision, the values, and then the strategic directions for the district. And then the administrative team, the management team, takes that and runs with that with a 3-year operational plan on how to implement what you've set with that strategic roadmap. The other parts of governance are around developing that 3-year board plan that complements the operational plan, but really is about your role, your governance role as a board. Also around a long-range district model, part of your, I think, referendum planning, your facilities planning, budget planning tend to be around that long-range district model. And then because you're the only employee that you supervise is the superintendent, it's really around hiring and evaluating the superintendent. On the management side, it's around that 3-year operational plan, which is the second item you see there. It's around the performance management system, the vision cards, which is how you know that you're making progress on the strategic plan. And then from there, connected to that district 3-year operational plan, are school improvement plans, department improvement plans. I know Dr. Bass and the team have been working on that. And then the monitoring reports to you, which you already started, I think over the past year and a half already. So those are kind of the big structural pieces of strategic planning. The next slide, you have seen a number of times, and it is really around the education leadership system. So when we did the strategic plan a long, long time ago now, when we talked about the desired daily experiences of your students, staff, and families, this is around how all the groups of adults support that desired daily experience of students, staff, and families. So there are specific roles under governance, management, and consultation. Your team up here even talked about consulting with your different interested parties. So Ray and I looked at each other and we said, we're happy to hear that you're using that language. And so all of those different roles have different responsibilities. Dr. Queener is going to take you through the role of governance. We're going to, in the interest of time tonight, not go over the role of management and consultation because we're working on your board plan. So, Dr. Queener.
So as you remember, we have 5 areas of roles and responsibilities under governance. As some may know, obviously, pretty common is that the board and the governance authority of district policy is one of their top priorities. That's usually commonly understood. Some of the other nuanced roles are not quite as commonly understood. So operational oversight and organizational direction sometimes can be confused with operational direction, not just oversight. And so in the monitoring report work that the team has already been doing, that's how the board oversees the operations, but doesn't necessarily direct or control or manage that. Board self-governance is how boards govern themselves. That includes your professional development, your training, policies that are specific to how you operate. It's how the board governs itself. The other common one that most people understand is that the board is in charge of hiring and evaluating the superintendent. But there's also some nuances to superintendent relations as we'll look at your 1-year plan and then the conversation of your 3-year plan is how do you have those communication tools that enhance that relationship between the school board and the superintendent. And then lastly, public engagement, community relations, and advocates for public ed are another role of those in governance.
And then the authority of management, and then the authority of consultation. And we wanted to put those in as a reminder, but knowing that we have limited time. There's a little bit more detail on the next slide as we get into the board responsibilities. Ray talked through some of those. I think we're going to get a little bit more in detail here before we jump into updating the 1-year plan and talking about the 3-year.
So the language that you see on this screen around district policy and governance actually comes from the Carver governance model. There's a couple of models of policy. There's the Carver model and the MSBA model. But basically they both do the same thing. They define what the ends are. We like to say the board determines what will be provided to whom at what cost. Those are the end policies. The board also then has limitation policies. So here's what we want to do, but within these bumpers or these parameters, so limitation policies. And the monitoring reports are how you are informed of progress. How do you do that operational oversight? And so they're all part of the performance system, keeping the board aware and the public aware of the progress. And usually that evolves into a policy statement at some point. As we mentioned, the operational oversight, that's how you engage with your strategic roadmap. How do you know what's happening in terms of data and progress, making sure that the district's moving toward your vision and your established strategic directions.
And as we move into the next three.
So again, we talked a lot about the self-governance, how the board governs itself, your systems and structures, and self-management and appraisal. So how does the board evaluate the board as an operating board, as a governing board? How are you taking a look at that? Superintendent relations, again, I already mentioned most of this. It's how the superintendent-board relationships are defined. And then the public engagement, varying levels of public engagement. Osseo Area Schools has gone through several elements of public engagement over the last few years, whether it's facility development, program development. So you've had many opportunities to engage public on many topics.
And just a reminder for the public engagement, it's the board directing the administrative team on issues typically where you want some information and engagement leading up to a decision. Referendum is a typical one, right? How much information can you gather? So as you're making critical decisions, you will, let the administrative team that you'd like to hear some intentional engagement so that you can understand what's happening across the community before you make that critical decision, rather than you going out there and saying, I'm going to do I'm going to engage and arrange all of it. So you all can be informed equally. So you have, I believe you received in your packet, a sample 3-year board plan. This is by no means what you need to do, but it gives you a sense of what you would see over the course of 3 years of the board's plan. The one that you have in place, the year that we're about to embark on, typically has a lot more detail, but the subsequent 2 years then give you the opportunity to say, as we look out next year and the following year, are there some things that we need to be mindful of? Some big decisions that we might anticipate that the administrative team, expects you'll be having a discussion about. So, and this is not to say that your district is doing it, but if the district were to be considering boundary changes, if you were bursting at the seams in enrollment, and you were looking at facilities capacity issues, you might say, in the following year, under our public engagement, we're going to have a whole round of engagement around facilities. So that might go under that topic. The top line there under district policy, what we typically see when we're working with school districts is a policy review cycle. So I know every year something will come up, right? The legislature, for example, has a lot of districts looking at their policies on a number of legislative items this year. So that's always going to happen, and you will be taking that on. But many districts will say, in this year, we're going to look at the 100 and 200 policies. So in 2 years from now, it would be 200, 300. So there's always that policy review cycle. Counselor Moore, we've already talked with her about the fact that she would like to help the board policy committee get on that kind of review cycle. So that's why you would see, if your district was on it, where it would say, we're going to do the 100s this year, the 200s next year, the 300s the following year. And so that's what we would recommend. And you'll see, if you knew that you were going to do a policy review of some specific a policy that is something that's coming down the line, and you want to make sure that your policy is in line, you might put it on there for next year, for example. Again, taking capacity into consideration. So this is just a sample of that policy. What you have in front of you, and what Kay is going to show you next. Yeah.
So if you just go back to that 3 years, the other thing that this allows is that the first graphic that we showed where we had the governance elements and the management elements, and we focus in on the management element of operational plan and the school board's element of three-year governance plan, is that then you have the administration and the board working together on a three-year plan. So as administration's thinking about operational initiatives 3 years out, the board can be engaging in conversation for needs, whether it's policy related, budget related, or staffing related. That's a governance decision the board will make. So it's meant to be working in tandem so that both governance and management are planning multiple years in advance.
Right. And, you know, if Mr. Morstad thought that you would be facing a structural deficit, and you aren't.
We're not.
You're not, and you're not. But if a district could, if your executive director of finance saw that you were facing that cliff 3 years down the line, again, you would be preparing for that, both with the operational plan and the board governance plan. You'd be saying, here are the things we're gonna be doing this year, next year, and the following year, leading up to that time and place. All right, so you have a draft of a one-year board plan. You've been essentially refining the one-year plan that was put in place, I think, 2 years ago under Superintendent McIntyre. So have you had a chance to look at the version that was sent to you last Friday? And I think you received an updated version. The cabinet had a chance to take a closer look at it with Dr. Heil. Dr. Heil, I don't mean to put you on the spot. Is there anything here that you want the board members to be aware of, any changes that you want them to?
No, we just negotiation strategies were added on there. Nothing major. Looking at January, looking at some restorative work for the board, as well as getting some equity training in during the year as well.
And so you have, obviously, July through December is the initial page. The operational oversight row there is in line with the expected monitoring reports and the operational plan. So the administrative team has been in consultation, I think, with the chair and the vice chair already around some of these items, and you've seen this version before. I will point out, when you look under superintendent relations for February and March, those are items that we at TeamWorks would recommend be part of operational oversight, not be part of superintendent relations, because those are really reports from the superintendent about what's happening with those advisory committees, rather than the communication between the board and the superintendent about your relationship with each other. So we would just recommend that those be moved up to operational oversight. That's the one thing that I would recommend. And then as we look at overall with each of these items, I would say there's an opportunity here. You have your standing item under board self-governance to review this calendar, the one-year calendar, or the items coming up on your board agendas. We would recommend that you include on the board self-governance professional development for the year, at least the month that you might be looking at your full calendar, where it's heavy, where holidays fall, and saying, when would you like to have board professional development sessions on this one-year calendar? And as you think 3 years, would you typically want to have them in the same month, knowing that you might have a little breathing room in some months over others? The other item that Ray and I have talked about is, rather than looking at the 3-year plan just maybe once a year, look at it a couple times a year, every 60 to 90 days, and maybe you wouldn't have the need for having that standing item there as well.
Sure.
So look at it just a little bit more frequently, so it's staying top of mind, and it's not as big of a lift. So we're going to give you a couple of minutes to look through the one-year plan and see if there's any suggested changes you have for the one-year plan first, and then we'll talk about the 3-year plan. Does that work for you all?
Christine?
Yes.
We don't have
January.
Jen. January to June of the first year, of the 1 year plan. I printed mine out beforehand, but on.
Are there?
Did Sherry give you a side,
Yeah,
like
you
a
can
side, on the side, there was a,
Oh,
I thought I looked through that.
yes, she gave us another.
look like
Yes.
that? Sorry.
Yes.
I thought I looked through that.
Should look like this one here.
Yeah, I thought I looked through that.
There it is.
You have that one?
You have it?
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Got it.
Got it, all right?
Okay, thank you.
In a different place than expected.
So when I looked at this, it seemed consistent with the items that we've historically had in the place that we've historically had them. Is there anything that was different that you wanted to call our attention to?
No.
And just what I brought forward,
Yeah.
just, suggesting some movement. in-
With the policy.
And I do have a question, is it says in September, board professional development to be determined, is that typically in September, or is there a certain rhythm to when that usually is in the past?
It's been different.
Okay. Do you guys find that have been on the board in the past, is there a certain time of year or month that is a better time to?
We haven't dictated that in the past.
Okay,
That's been pretty much given to us.
okay. So is September
So-
the date then, or that's a question mark?
It would be, I would ask if we
Oh, you'd
needed
find a
to.
date.
I think
Okay.
that's
Yeah,
something
to
we
hold
could,
it. Yeah,
we
it would be open to
discuss.
discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
because I can say
I'm
as a
just curious.
teacher, September's not real.
September's not a good time for
Yeah, I was
educators.
wondering, that's why I was curious. if
Real
that
good.
was in the past.
When I went through this and doing my homework, that's one thing that I wanted to add as well, is when we do professional development, and what and how often.
Mhm.
And then also, if we're doing any professional development with the cabinet.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, and then also if we want to add in any listening sessions and topics for the listening sessions. I think somewhere on here I saw something about our school safety presentation / listening session. We did have one last year, but it might be something else. And the format of kind of an informational session then / listening session, so that if there's some info to hang the questions on, and so that we're not missing something that people might want to know.
I like that.
I have a couple other topics if we're entertaining that, but we can.
Does anybody need more time to review before we jump into?
Sorry.
Can I just ask a question, since we're all here, more for the three of you? The student school board representatives, the new ones that will be coming, how are the new student school board representatives chosen and selected, and when? 'Cause it looks like they'll be coming, the introduction is in September 26th. Is that?
Well,
Go ahead.
because
This
you weren't
is-
here when
I know.
So, we
I know
have.
Amy T.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have, Tollefson is what I'm saying.
Tollefson puts out. yeah.
Amy Tollefson is like the staff member that is like the liaison to the student board reps.
Yes.
And there's an application process through the high schools.
Okay.
And then
Okay, so they're,
Her-
all students are made aware that that's
Yes,
a-
all
Right.
students are, and they have
Okay.
to apply, and
Okay.
then they are chosen.
Okay.
I can't
Is it-
tell you if it's just her, or if she has
Okay.
other people that choose them, but we don't.
See it?
They have an
Flowers?
interview?
Yeah.
Okay. With who do they have that in?
That's a good question. I'm not sure who we have. I'm sure she
Okay.
does.
What's it,
Yeah.
it's Amy Collison, and my
Yeah.
understanding is
Yes.
that,
Kelly Parker. Oh, Kelly, yeah.
Kelly.
Bless you.
And then we also are working with Brooklyn Bridge Alliance for Youth as well, so I'm not sure
Yeah.
if there's a representative from Brooklyn Bridge Alliance for Youth.
Yeah, we discussed it, that if there were some opportunities for improvement in the process and partnering with them and their approach.
Is there a way we
And-
can be informed of that so we know before we're introduced to them what the process and who interviews them? And
Tell me what you need Amy to share with how the process is
I would
done?
just like to know, yeah, just because we want a balanced representation of our, diverse students, it just would be good to know how they're interviewed, how they're selected, just to achieve that good balance of students.
And I do want to separate the two. That's different from the superintendent school board advisory
Yes.
that I'll
Right.
be. That's
Right.
totally separate from
Right.
this one. But
Right.
yeah, I can have
Right.
Amy send that out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think probably, to get at what you're looking for, what's probably more important is how is it communicated to the students so that they know they can apply.
Yeah, right.
That would be what I would be concerned
Sure.
about. But for sure, there's an application process. For sure, Amy Thompson Thompson.
Mhm.
I'm sure Kelly Parpart is a part of that because she is the head of secondary. And
There were
then Brooklyn
emails.
Bridge is new.
There were emails sent out, there were posters put in
There was
school.
posters put up, yeah, but I remember seeing that.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was well advertised.
It's good to
And
know.
last year was your first year,
Mhm.
was
Mhm.
second year?
Second year.
Okay.
I can get that sent out though. And Amy is working with me on a different process for the
Yeah.
superintendent advisory. Our goal is to have, for sure, 7-12 representative, a couple of students, eventually sixth grade. They gotta get used to sixth grade first, but then twice a year, getting the littles, getting the babies, some fifth graders in and get their input as well, so.
A separate topic for another day, but related to the student reps. It would be nice to maybe have some sort of a session with them to find out what their interests and passions are for improving their school sites. I think we often try to get them to weigh in on topics that are of little to no interest to them, or even the general public. So just finding out what more they'd like to be involved in, or what discussions they'd want to be a part of, or topics they'd want to raise, I think would be nice to kind of look at and potentially add.
And I'm trying not to be confusing because I believe the superintendent student advisory board is going to address that. I wasn't sure with the school board student representative is actually exactly what they did. So it was a tighter group that I would be asking that exact question. Thomas.
That was
did
the
ask
student
for-
reps.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, that was for the student reps.
yeah. Yeah.
What was your question?
You're talking about your advisory.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I wasn't talking about
I'm
that.
sorry, okay.
Just
Just
we
the
want
student
good
reps.
clarity as to the purpose and engagement of the student reps and
Okay.
make sure there's clear distinction on your advisory.
Do you have a policy regarding your student representatives on the school board?
Not that I know of.
No, don't use the P word. Don't say
And I don't think we've spent time necessarily debriefing on kind of our first pilot year program. I know, like I said, we were looking at what are some ways that we can think about it and ensure it's a valuable experience for everyone, but we haven't had a discussion on that.
Okay.
And maybe it's a given, I don't see it listed, but I'm assuming there are other items that would be included in those monthly agendas, like the George Floyd resolution.
So is that something you would like to see here, Mr.
Yeah, for me.
Yeah, by resolution, it was clearly in the action items that would be that. I think we've also included it with some other updates in that month.
Mr. Bass, was it May, the George Floyd?
Right. May, right, yes.
That's why this is a draft and why we're talking about it.
Yeah, it was
Right.
paired, it was paired with the RISE committee update.
What month do we want to
May.
do?
That was May.
Okay, what month do we want to do the next update on the LGBTQIA plus resolution?
Does this work, August?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So as we do the 3-year.
Right.
And then I seem to remember at some point, it was a previous work session, maybe one of Tanya's first, Director Simon's first work sessions, when we did the little
Yeah.
whiteboard with the ideas.
Yep.
Are we gonna revisit that and maybe build some of that in, or is that our?
So yeah, that's a good point, the board interest items, and so we should revisit that, and I know we want to balance aligning board interests and having transparency and engagement on that, especially in the agenda setting process, that we don't kind of have to come later and say, oh, I want to talk about this,
Yeah.
that we have that good discussion early. And then where it may already be aligned with the existing work. So I know we're trying to balance, there's already a lot of work, but we want to make sure that we've got board interest items considered as well. So I think we want to revisit when we conduct that type of work.
Is that something that you would be open if the superintendent and cabinet take a look at kind of the agendas and how much you may have in any one month and maybe suggest that for a work session? Would that make sense to you all?
Yes, I think before we get too far into the year, we should revisit kind of what we had discussed before and have kind of reopen that discussion. And then determine kind of what outcomes we have from that and where it may fit with existing work or in the 3-year plan. Does that make sense?
So our September 12th work session is pretty tight. Are we okay with October 10th with that at all, or later on the September 12th?
I'm good with October. September is important. I mean, those things are
Those are big,
are pressing
big
right
ones.
now.
I would be good with that as well. And I'd also say for some of those lighter meetings where we're coming in for like an hour, maybe also looking at pairing PD on those days as well.
The business meetings, you mean?
That's a great
Yeah.
idea.
The business meetings, yeah.
It's a good idea.
Or even some of the shorter work sessions. I mean, I know we're trying to maximize our work sessions, but yeah, if we can avoid extra meetings.
No, I think that's a great idea where we have a lighter agenda on some of the board meetings to add PD before or a short work session before.
Yep.
Yeah, I like that idea too.
Chair Mosquito Jones, you have some thoughts?
No, just on our 3-year, it isn't, I don't think it's listed on, it's changed since I printed it out today, so, just to make sure that we have the monitoring reports on our 3-year draft.
Under the operational oversight category?
Yeah, yes. Also, under proposed 23-24, I don't know if it's feasible for the policy committee to review a third of the policies, given the amount of legislative changes, unless we pick just a couple buckets that are short and easy and that kind of thing.
I think you're actually close to a third with legislative changes.
Yes.
That's what I think. And quite a few of them are under the same category, so
Correct.
that would be helpful. And then there's been some interest on, and I know this would go to the policy committee, but just on reviewing our cell phone policy that we developed a few years ago.
Yeah, that's a good point. When the policy committee begins its meetings in October, we may want to gather input from the board if there's some specific board interests policies, because the policy committee, together with Ms. Moore, will determine what our schedule is. So if there's specific interest, we should probably reach out to gather that.
You want to discuss at the September work session or just do it via email?
We can probably do it via email. Gather.
And maybe include a review of what we've already looked at, because we just looked at the cell phone policy.
Yes.
It's hot again.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not sure what else is going to change, but yeah.
Yeah, we could share that. We could share some information on what we've recently.
Yeah, that's
updated.
good because I'm not on the policy committee,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
and it didn't come for review because
Yeah.
you probably decided not to change
Yeah,
anything.
not
but-
much
Yeah.
to it.
So once again, we're just going to be asking to send out in September via email what policies that the board may be interested in reviewing. Just want to make sure I'm understanding.
Yeah.
Besides the legislative, yeah.
Yeah, and then we discuss it in policy, and that's an
Mhm.
open meeting too.
Got it.
That's mostly what I had for additions well, the only other thing is we've got Teamworks annual training on 25, 26, but we didn't have it on, the other years.
I did
I
like.
think you're looking
You
at
look at
the
the-
sample.
This is a sample, that's
Yeah.
a sample. That's not
I mean to
ours.
change from the sample.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
All right, that's the teacher reminding us that we should update our information.
Well, I mean,
Got it.
I like what's on the sample and include that.
In here, yep.
Mhm.
I liked when you were mentioning the listening sessions and some information with listening. I think there's probably some different topics that we have some awareness on that would be good informational topics and listening session. Based on kind of our previous history and interest, maybe we can ideate on that at a point in time. But I know there's special education information and needs and feedback and interest area. Safety we've already got on there. School discipline behavior has been a topic of interest, especially with the new policy.
Parental involvement and rights is
Yeah.
a big one.
Yeah.
But when you're saying that, it occurs to me that maybe we want to solicit
Yeah.
from the public
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
on, what are things that they want to know more about or
And you can talk to
have
Kay.
questions about.
We've done some good tools when we want to do a quick pulse, where it's not maybe scientifically valid, but it's a good kind of pulse check.
Yeah, do a quick, that, can't remember what it's called.
Brush fire?
No.
That.
Thought exchange,
exchange, yeah.
that's what I'm thinking, thank you.
I didn't even see you back there still.
I know.
Thanks for helping me with my word recall.
So you're saying, Jackie, listening sessions with specific
Yeah.
topics,
Topics.
different
Mhm.
to kind of help people know if it's worthwhile.
If they
for
want to
sure.
come or
Okay.
not to come.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah, and the information is helpful.
yeah.
I think it's just helpful if as a public person to
Mhm.
get the info first.
Mhm.
And that worked really well with our safety
Mhm.
community.
May I ask, I don't know, so how does it work in OSEO for setting superintendent goals? How does it work with the board? Does it need to
changed
be
it
a
every
year? I
year.
don't know.
We've changed it every
Oh,
year.
It's, we have done it.
Yes, we do.
Just to be clear. But we've changed it every year, and I think we want to do one more change. We changed from using specific, like MSBA template
Oh, sure. Yeah.
to having it align with our strategic
Yeah.
makes
directions,
sense.
which
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
However, I think our last run with it, the rubric
Yeah.
was up for
Mhm.
different interpretations by board members.
Hmm.
And so I don't think that when we rated it, it accurately expressed what we wanted to express as a board.
It was a hybrid of 3 tools. It was a TeamWorks tool, MSBA tool, and another standards tool. And so I worked with Corey on kind of merging and melding a lot of things together. And the strategic direction as well.
Right. And we didn't know until we used it and went, oh,
Right.
wait a minute.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think, do we want to start with the current one, and maybe work with TeamWorks to massage it a little bit or gain more clarity?
I just don't want what happened last time to happen this time.
I think one of the bigger pieces that we'll need no matter what is prior to using the rubric, some sort of.
Common understanding of what it
Yes.
means.
Yeah.
Definitions.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So normally are the goals set with the board in like September, October or something, or just let me know.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Well,
September,
yeah,
October, yeah.
with the understanding that, there was COVID for a while. And so
Oh, no, I
last year,
get it. I know,
so
I
last
get
year
it.
was one of the first years that we could be on time with that.
Yeah.
So what we would typically see on the 1 year and then subsequently in the other years around the superintendent relations are just those types of items. So in the month, and if you wanted to push it up into, July, August, so that you're going into the school year with a sense of what those goals are, that align probably to those strategic priorities that Dr. Heil just shared with you all. So that you could say that those are some of the goals that would typically be included on your 1-year plan with superintendent relations. When you're leading up to your superintendent evaluation, your annual evaluation, when we get into the 3-year plan, making sure you give yourself some runway to talk about the contract negotiations before you're at contract negotiations. Those would typically be in that 3-year plan projecting out, so that you could put that in there. We have seen under superintendent relations with some school districts, initiating, and I'm not suggesting this, I'm just saying we have seen that, board members may want to meet with the superintendent individually once a month, and so that becomes part of, 1, implementing it, and 2, maybe just making sure that that's there, in terms of, which board member or a board member a month over the course of the 9-month school year. So those are just some other things we would see under that line item if you wanted to implement, or if Dr. Heil has some suggestions, having been a superintendent, for what she'd like to see in her relationship with you as well.
Okay.
I definitely like the idea of moving the goal setting to July or August.
Yeah. Agree.
I think that was our intent. And then, Dr. Heil just started.
Yes.
Well, actually, it makes a lot of sense if you're having conversations in October about future year objectives and operational plans, that it starts to build, and so by the time you get through the spring, it'll all be matriculating down through a summer goal defining and setting by August.
Other input? Okay.
Want to move on to then the 3-year work plan?
Well, the last thing that we thought we would have some additional conversations, we picked up a couple of notes already on some things that were highlighted for the 3-year plan. And maybe looking at the sample for ideas, or if there's things that you already have in your head about what might populate 24, 25, and 25, 26. We can do this a couple of ways. We can, as a whole board, go through one row at a time, capture ideas and thoughts. Again, the idea tonight is not to be exhaustive, but to be a starter for a conversation. So if that's, or we could divide and conquer if the board wants. We could have groups working on different sections to get ideas. It's really, we've seen it done both ways, so we're open to whatever is the wish of the board. Large group or small groups?
We've typically liked large group.
Yes.
Okay. So any
Large
disagreement?
group of 5.
No.
We're good.
All right. So why don't we, we'll just take all 5 categories, we'll walk through and see what initial thoughts you have, and then we'll hopefully come out with we will come out with a draft. And then maybe for some homework for board members to be thinking about, especially years 2 and 3, if there are ideas that come to you that you might have considered, we can come back and revisit this in a couple of months. So I've captured in district policy, one of the things that we talked about for this year was the board's interest of policies, and then I wasn't sure whether cell phone policy was 23, 24, 24, 25.
Yes, and I apologize for jumping ahead to the 3-year.
That's all right.
I'm more of a holistic thinker.
That's.
The policy committees typically defined what policies it wants to review for that year. If we want to change that and plan it out over 3 years, we could do that, but I feel like the policy committee establishing it provides some flexibility to understand
Okay.
what's current or relevant, but I'm open to feedback on that.
Do we ensure do we ensure that all policies are touched over the
Yes,
3
we
years?
have, yes. We've had a good review cycle.
So does the request then go to the policy committee for if board members want a particular one looked at?
So that's what we were talking about earlier.
Okay.
Yes. That every year we would kind of have some input.
I mean, ultimately, it's going to be up to the policy
Yes.
committee of whether or not they want to take
Take
that
it out.
topic up anyway.
That's correct.
So, I mean,
Well, in our
we
first
can take
priority.
input, but it's going to be based on what our priorities and expertise.
That's
And I
correct.
think that first priority is to update the policies per the legislative stuff.
I mean, I think you could add a bullet point, maybe board interest policies, so it's just on there to say that we would likely gather that input each year, and the policy committee may act on it, or it may
Yeah.
not.
Okay.
So it's checking board interest on policies
Yeah.
annually.
My question is, so I'm getting some insight being on 287. The board policies, the ones that are specific to the board.
Series 100?
Yeah, Series 100.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if that's something that,
Yeah, sorry.
do we look at that every 3 years? Do we look at it every year? Some districts take policies and make sure that they've been followed every year. I'm not interested in doing that.
So what we would typically see is that the 200s would be in whatever the 3-year cycle is. But boards that are operating in governance and want to work together effectively will about twice a year look at how you've been working together. So are you,
Right.
working in partnership? Are we honoring agreements? If we've talked to you about, we have a board book that some school boards have developed, and they review that booklet typically January, summer, to say, are we following this, generally speaking, and then, when you have changes in leadership, typically again in January, that's when you might just review all those things again. So it's up to you how frequently you want to revisit your work together, and that could also be part of your self-governance.
Yeah, and I guess I misrepresented myself a little bit and got off the track that I really wanted to get on are those ones that we want the whole board to look at rather than just the policy committee is what I think was the next piece of that particular thing. Because I know that there are other boards that for those particularly the whole board looks at it, or the whole board has input very specifically gathered.
We're talking about board positions and roles. You're talking about
Yeah, just the
board
Series
policies?
100.
Yeah.
Or like
Yeah.
Like in 287, we're looking over the policy on how to develop policy in the district, and that's a whole board piece. in some respects.
So I think what I hear you saying is that you're not suggesting a full review, but that the board relooks at approved board policy 209 as an example, just as a review. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is when that series comes up,
Okay.
so let's say it's coming up next year,
Yep.
that it comes to a whole board work session,
Got it.
just to make sure, because we're all, you know,
Yeah.
it's
That
been a
makes
new
sense. Yeah.
board coming here and there,
Yeah,
and we've
makes
just been
sense.
going by what old boards have
Yeah.
done.
I agree. We wouldn't want a 3-person subcommittee of the board imposing policy. I mean, you don't impose it because we all vote at the end of the day, but I think you're right. I think in there's self-governance, which is ways of working, and then there's the policy. So I think that would make sense that in the years where we're doing the policies related to board, maybe we have a work session prior to the policy committee work, so we gather that board input, and then it goes to policy, and then comes back to the board.
And it could be a 5-minute thing.
Yep.
I mean, maybe we're all like, oh, yep, that's good.
Yeah, right. That makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense.
Thank you for clarifying. I've worked with boards that actually part of their practice at the organizational meeting is that they'll reread 209. And that's a standard practice. It's not an official review, but just as a refresher of what our 209 policy is. So that's what I was trying to clarify.
And I have that here, and Councilor Moore will put it in just for the sake of having it on your 3-year plan under 24-25, but I put it in whenever you're going to revisit the 200s. Yeah, that's a suggestion.
Anything else in the policy realm from board members? How about in the operational oversight? Anything that you've been thinking about, or especially in those other 2 years, 24, 5, 6?
Just the monitoring reports that I said earlier.
Yep. Hearing none, how about the self-governance?
Can we add affiliation with AMSD? I see that we have a lot of stuff on here, MSBA, but also a stronger partnership with that as a board.
Under self-governance? Is that what
Yeah,
you-
like the leadership conference in November or whenever it is.
Oh, because we have that under the sample, okay.
Yeah.
I just have a question under, or sorry, I'm moving ahead. You're on operations, so, right?
Not
self-governance.
Regarding self-governance, okay. What does that mean, board candidate training on 24, 25 proposed?
So we've done a couple of trainings pre-filing for board members. And so the district has advertised that they're going to host a session for anybody interested in running for school board. And we've went through basically an overview of the education leadership system, talked about governance, management, consultation, just for an awareness of folks that might be interested in running. And quite frankly, to assist with a person that might want to run to avoid getting into a campaign around management issues that they individually don't have the ability to achieve. They have to do that through a collective process. So we used to be really busy in January, kind of doing the update with new board members. Then it was November after they were elected, and now we've seen districts are asking us to come talk about interested candidates pre-filing. So that's what that was.
Okay. And in the past, our district has not done this, correct?
I don't.
Yeah, these ideas in the sample are just,
Okay, yeah, that's what I was curious.
yeah, just for,
Okay.
Oh, okay.
it's a sample that we've kind of put together
Okay.
from other places, so.
Okay, that's helpful.
Not yours, it's not yours.
Yeah, no, that's helpful to clarify.
And I would say if we want to do that, that would happen in July.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
So it is technically that
Yep.
school year.
the other thing under self-governance related to that, if you know when you have board members up for election, some school boards will just put 2 seats, up for election, and then that same year, they'll put potential board member orientation, just so that you know you're gonna plan for that. Your orientation after you became a board member, but again, you may not need that, but that's usually something that would be put in, just so that you can say, we know we're gonna potentially have seats turning over. People retire, that happens, and so it's just on your radar, on your 3-year plan. You generally know it intimately.
So I think it would seem like good practice to review our board processes, workflow, structures, ways of working every year, just as a good refresher. I think it's nice to just revisit that and recommit to the way that we work.
That was what we had decided.
Yeah, yep. I think I would have board interest in developing an evaluation tool. We do have one. We do some surveying, so that's on our list that we do. Continuing to evaluate that.
You have a tool now?
We have a survey. Is that a
Isn't
tool?
it the Teamworks?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Teamworks of
They do the
how do you feel
progress.
like we're evaluating,
Yep.
how do we feel like we're working in this area and that one area?
And we do that annually.
Do we feel that it's working? Do we need to do any additional work on it?
Or do you want it to be more extensive?
I think for that one, we also need some sort of universal understanding of the rubric.
Yeah.
And I think, Kate, your department periodically also does a community survey. So school boards, when they know they're gonna have a community survey, will include, information on, and I don't know if you include questions about like board leadership, but that becomes part of your self-evaluation whenever you're doing community surveys.
I think more extensive could be helpful. And like you said, Thomas, understanding more what.
So maybe a refinement of the tool in 23, 24,
Yeah.
clarity on rubrics.
The scoring.
The initially when we did that, that was really to help the board understand your understanding of governance and where you all thought you were as a school board. It was a pretty small survey, so you might want to think about what is it that we want moving forward, where you keep some items just to check progress over time, and then say, now what else do we want to be asking about our self-evaluation?
And we probably use that Carter framework as the framework for it, I would think. That makes sense.
Anything else in self-governance?
Just make sure we have PD on all the years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we have anything in our district in regards to how much training, MSBA training board members have to have? Do we have to, is it like, does
There
everyone
hasn't
have to
been a
have
requirement.
one or? Okay.
There's been suggestions.
Sure.
I would love if we could find some alternatives to that too, so
Sure.
that people have some choices.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
For when board members are brand new.
Versus not having to attend and being MSBA.
Well, it would just be nice if there were other
Yeah,
options.
I got you. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, particularly when some people have to go to St. Cloud to take it. Just kidding, we did.
Anything else? How about in superintendent relations? I've already have the refined superintendent eval/goal setting process for the current year.
on, I heard you all say you'd like to have that goal setting occur in, summer,
Mhm.
July,
Mhm.
August, in the future.
Yes.
Dr. Heil, is there anything that, from your previous experiences, we should have in here?
No, I would just like to have, it doesn't need to be a monthly board and superintendent meeting, but it would be wonderful to even have every other month or something to meet individually with board members, because that's the way you can answer questions. They may just be festering and give you that information. So I'll send it out again, ask if you want to meet monthly or by month. And it could be any way how, because I meet with the chair, vice chair every week, so it would be nice to.
Yeah, she's sick of just us.
No.
How about we start with individual board member, superintendent meeting, and then frequency will be determined.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else, Dr. Heil, from prior experience? Or okay, public engagement, last line. Captured some ideas on your current 1 year that would be carried over. Anything in addition to that work for years 2 and 3 of your plan?
Do you do listening sessions every year?
We've been trying.
What is the frequency of those?
We've done it, some years we had like 4 of them in a given year, and other years that hasn't worked out.
I don't know if we should define a frequency. I think we need to figure out topics first.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it just for the sake of doing it anymore.
I wasn't suggesting, I just didn't know if it was once a year or multiple times.
I think we're committed to finding ways to make it work. Yeah, but a number probably isn't useful right now.
Would you like me to enter for your 3-year plan listening sessions based on topics of interest TBD annually?
Yeah, that's good.
I like it.
I heard you, no, you have information sessions on this year related to the referendum. Did you typically have information sessions of some kind? I'm looking to you and I'm looking to Kay and Dr. Heil to see if that's something you typically do.
I don't think so.
No.
No.
Not in my
No.
experience.
No.
Only when you need them.
Since I've been here, only referendum and that safety one.
Those are the reoccurring ones, but we've been working on having some mechanism every year.
Oh, yeah, we want more.
Yes,
I'm just saying.
yes, I agree, yeah. We have had the board visits. We've had the calendar to sign up to site visits. I think that's worked well.
The whole board meetings?
No,
work sessions?
so Corey would provide us with, whenever he was going out to sites, he would make it available for us to sign up to go along with. And we can determine how you want to do that and frequency, but I think that was really
Going
nice.
every Friday mornings, so come on in.
Yeah, he did like Thursdays. Yeah.
Friday mornings are good.
I like Friday. I might have a Friday off that Osseo doesn't. You never
You
know.
have to make sure you have the right T-shirt on when you walk into Pacific School. Don't mix up those shirts. That's good. It's good, Tom. It's good.
Added those into board site visits with the superintendent.
That's good.
How is public awareness of board work defined? What do you mean by that under public engagement?
So there was a couple of boards that wanted to be intentional about communicating how boards function and work. Led to whether it was a handbook or even a video on their website defining the roles of school board members, how they function and work. So they just wanted to have some intentionality around a specific communication about the workings of a school board.
Yeah, I really like that. And I'd like to put it on for this year too, or at least attempt to try to do it for this year. We've also talked about what kind of communication we have that's directly from the board, instead of everybody having their own individual Facebook page that's got their own spin to it, but like one message from the board. Just some, I've heard that from a few of the board members, so. Something to think
Some
about.
school boards who, because of differences, have chosen not to have like separate social media. Some school boards don't have any, honestly, any devices at all anymore, that some have gone back to paper. And so it's just what you want to do in terms of we're one board and we're speaking in one voice. So you just see that movement as well.
I guess I'm thinking, and if I were, my opinion is that if we have the capacity in Kay's office to just after a board meeting, put on all the social media that we've put on and send it through Schoology or what, through just a quick synopsis.
Like a board update.
Yeah, just a quick board update.
After the referendum.
After
And to get through that, yeah.
we are.
I
yeah.
got you. I got you.
I said when and if we
I
have the
know.
capacity.
She's over there going,
I got you, Kay.
Yeah, we could do some ideation on what that could look like.
We've worked with other districts who've done a quick, here are the top 3 things that happened at the board meeting, and then that's shared out so that people don't have to wait for minutes or.
Christine, via what venue is it shared out?
Web,
Oh, I
social
see.
media,
Okay.
emails, if you have an interest list, but it's a blast that just goes out.
Sure.
And then you direct them to the link of, here's the board action, and it's a summary, it's not, again, waiting for someone else to interpret it.
Or sitting
It's just
through the
sending it
meeting.
quick, like, here are the highlights from the board meeting. By no means is it a full newsletter or the full minutes, it's just the top items.
I think in the short term, we could add some links pretty easily in our additional news section of our e-newsletters, if that would be helpful.
Additional links to.
Yeah, in our newsletters, we've added this additional kind of news, it's just kind of links to different things, so we could pretty easily add it into there, like with an upcoming meeting or just a meeting that just happened.
User friendly.
Full group that we could tackle.
This isn't exactly public engagement, but I'm gonna just kind of throw it out there. Meet and confer. Some districts do that differently, where there's more board to bargaining group communication or hearing from staff, almost like a staff listening session. I know Anoka Hennepin is not the model I want, but they do have one. And I know some districts have some different models of that, just having more direct voice from staff and or bargaining units. Just an idea. We could figure out what that might look like, or if there's mutual board interest.
Meeting confer with the board?
Yeah.
They use an actual words, meeting confer?
Yes, some boards do,
Sure.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
You think it's similar to the town halls that the union has done in the
Those
past?
those are working well. So if that just goes on the calendar, or we can figure out. That could be something that just goes on the calendar.
Which we typically only do 2 people at a time.
Yes,
so that-
correct. Yeah. Mhm. But I think that's a good one to put on the calendar because we know we do it. I guess
To
technically
actually-
that'd be their calendar, not ours, because we're invited. But
Sure, but to actually hear from staff there, right?
Mhm. But to also show it's a priority for us to hear staff listen.
Mhm.
Are we wanting a listening session with staff, or do we want meeting confer with the staff? Meeting confer is
Yeah.
quite a serious term, so I'm trying to define the
Yeah.
terminology.
I mean, I feel like we can
drop it based on what Tanya just said. We already meet with them formally at least once a year and informally throughout the year, so I'm not.
I think they've called it town hall before.
Town hall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Staff town hall. I'll just put a question mark by that one, or you?
Brett, is that right? Yeah.
No malls, yeah.
Anything else in public engagement for your initial draft?
The first bullet point, I think, comes on to ours. Maybe I was just pulling it over. I do know that we, board members, make an intentional effort to try to be at different events across the district.
Visibility.
Yeah, engagement. I would propose that we add some of the 279 events on there that the board members participate in. We can work that out.
Foundation.
Yeah.
Is your foot gonna be ready for the 5K in October?
Mascot duty, water station. No, but there are some different things that we all
Parades,
participate
things.
in, yeah, that might be worth noting, yeah.
Parentheses, like add the specific events and activities that you
Yes.
typically would be present at.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, another reason to have the frequency of review, because it's
Mm-hmm.
easier to think back the last 90 days instead of next June, think back the last 12 months.
Mhm.
So you can populate this, and then once the flow of it's happening, it becomes easier. We'll finish getting the draft, get it over to Dr. Heil to share with the board, and then at some point review it, update it in a couple of months.
Sounds good.
All right?
That's good. That is everything on our list for tonight. Any other comments before we move to closing out the session?
As we are getting back into the school year, I know we talked previously about a calendar of events.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, if we could start to work on that or find some way to get that out, so that we're not finding out about events last minute.
So we used to have like a Google Drive where all of the sites could put the events that they were having at their schools, that then the board members could know when they were, what was going on, and attend. I think Kay, you weren't here then. I don't know who populated it.
was in charge of
I want to say it was a Google Doc, and we left it up to the sites to put their events in it for where, if it's some type of celebration night or, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Thomas. That's been on my mind too.
Sherry Jones / Marquita, I think Corey reflected them, and they were populating them into that document.
Whatever's easy and representative of what the sites would want board member participation in.
Yeah.
We don't, whatever's easy.
Yeah.
It would be helpful if there's a link to that,
Yes.
like as part of your template to the board email weekly, just as a good reminder to check it every week. Because I'll check it at the beginning of the year and then I'll forget. Just saying.
Okay, any closing remarks? Okay, I just want to express appreciation for everybody's engagement tonight and good discussion and dialogue. I think it's a really productive work session for us. I appreciate it. With that, the work session is adjourned at 8:43 p.m. Woohoo! Got you out on time.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you.
Stay current.
Good teamwork.
Turn off the recorder momentarily.
Thanks, Kate.
Yep.